evening and welcome to another episode of the Alex and More. I think we need to rebrand it and call it Alex More and Nick. Hot takes. But
Well,
welcome
at least an
again.
episode a year.
Welcome again to the show. You have been becoming quite popular on Twitter, giving a lot of your beliefs and your views, and they're very interesting. And you do get a lot of feedback from clinicians and even regular lay folks on Twitter. So I wanted to start off by you giving us some context of what you believe about the physical therapy profession, where we might be in the next 5 years, 10 years, maybe even 15, 20 years. Do you see yourself being a clinician still?
That's tough. And starting out with the hard question, so we'll dive right in. I mean, it's one of those things where I don't know. I am a obviously a clinician. I sit and social media is kind of like my sounding board. Why so many people choose to follow me, I have no idea. Like, I'm literally nothing special, just kind of an area that I just go and I talk and things I see day to day in real life clinical and experience, and the challenges I face day to day. Like, I have to be careful. I don't know if those are things that are going to accurately represent everybody else who may be a clinician, different settings and others in the field, or even what the average public perception of us is within that. So when I look at the field of physical therapy, I have sort of a jaded view of it, and I share these conversations a lot with others involved, whether it be patients, providers, students, others. I think we have a general like quality issue, and I don't know where that stems from. I'm not going to sit and put blame on any one person, but there's a lot of things in the way that healthcare is delivered, and not just in the physical therapy field, but the different challenges we're facing that have directly impacted patient care have really hindered our ability to truly practice at the top of our license. I don't necessarily think that quality is because we're not turning out good clinicians or good providers, but I think that the range just keeps getting tighter and tighter on allowing us to progress forward. I hope 5 years from now I am still in the clinic and doing what I do, and trying to represent myself, the company, my profession as best as I can to the public and the people who really truly are our stakeholders, the people we serve. And I'm hoping that I can continue to do that. But the outlook does leave a lot of room for concern. We're looking at another round of cuts with Medicare, which is going to result in decreased commercial payers and Medicare Advantage plans, and that's going to impact my bottom line, in terms of what my ability to make it. As inflation rises, reimbursement drops, like, how long is it going to be feasible? There is going to come a break. I'm not near it yet, but it's a lot more close than it was a decade ago when I started.
So if Nick is not a physical therapist, what does Nick do?
It's funny. I've always joked about this in the clinic, but I think I would be like in education, like I would love to be like a high school teacher.
I could totally see you doing that, like that teacher vibe,
Coach.
that coaches like the basketball. Well, I know you're a big wrestling person.
Yeah.
So.
Unfortunately, I was given the last name. Coach Hoops would be a great name as a basketball coach, but you don't want that. Trust me, you do not want that. So, but yeah, I mean, Ohio is actually like a really a pretty good state. Local school districts, like, the average teacher salary is pretty close to what I'm at. It's not too far away, and great benefits, summers off. It's not the worst gig in the world. I actually had a point, like, until I was like, I think it was like 32, that I could switch into education and my retirement age would still be about the same. And I didn't act on it, but I was considering it like, man, I could still do this. So nowadays, that was always my second, but after that, I don't know where else I would end up.
And that's bringing us back to the point where a lot of new grads are saying, I paid all this money, got a doctoral degree, and there are people that are teaching like high school or even elementary school making as much as they're currently making with a whole lot of debt. And unfortunately, the American Physical Therapy Association, which is APTA, often gets the blame for the always consistent cuts in payment and increasing student debt. Do you think that's fair for the hammer to fall on the APTA's head?
So I don't think it's like, hidden that I've been highly critical of, the APTA. I'm not a member. I've struggled with that a little bit. I'm a big supporter of our state association. I really like our state association. I'm actually very disappointed that I can't be a member of my state association without being an APTA member. To me, like, that's like, just no, take my money. Like, I actually want to be a member. I want to help, because I do see a little bit more like benefit and change and positive, growth in the profession within the profession. But as far as it like being the APTA's fault, I wouldn't necessarily put it on them entirely in regards to, say debt. I think there's a little more onus on the academic institutions. Not necessarily even within the PT departments themselves, although, if you take a job and you work within that, you need to at least recognize, like, okay, we are part of the problem, but what tuition has done over the past 10, 15, 20 years is a part of why we have this debt issue. I'm not sure the APTA can do anything about it. They're not going to be able to control private equity. They're not even going to control state equity or what state funding is. But, they could make statements on like, this is what we want to do. Maybe work with CAPTI a little bit more on setting tuition caps. I don't know well enough to speak educatedly on that, but I don't think that's necessarily an APTA. In terms of Medicare reimbursement, I would love to see the APTA obviously focus more lobbying efforts into reducing those cuts. And I don't know what that would entail, but what we're doing is not working. We've faced 10 plus years of straight cuts. Most codes are paying less now than they did when I started in 2015. I did a thread on it comparing 2025 is coming out. We're facing another average. I think it's like 2.8%. Okay. And then commercial insurers are going to follow those same rates. The Medicare Advantage plans are going to follow those same rates. You couple those two things together, and it is a tough sell for the outpatient setting. And both of you guys are in home health, and I think this year you guys both faced reductions, right? Home health.
Yes, 4% cut. 4% cut.
Yeah. I wasn't, obviously in the profession in the 90s and early 2000s and stuff like that, but my understanding is outpatient was raking in the money with like tons of coding and billing and things like that. Both of you may have better insight onto that. But I do have a feeling that home health, which is where a lot of people go to make the most money in the field, is going to start seeing what happened to outpatient. And it's probably going to cycle. It's probably going to be a pendulum. And it's going to be harder and harder to meet, the demands of these salaries. I could go make, 20, 30K more a year tomorrow if I went and worked in home health, living where I live at. There are PTAs working in home health who are making what I'm making as a PT. So, and that's local. But, that pendulum probably will eventually swing back. So how do we, kind of find a way to mediate that?
You're correct. I do see it happening. A lot of agencies are finding ways to adjust to the cuts. What I've been noticing that some people are requesting or recommending is that PTAs have a master's degree or maybe even a bachelor's degree. And to me, it's probably going to even set us back more. Um, I'm not in favor of it.
You would lose all the PTAs. You can't get a PTA.
Oh, absolutely.
You there's
I 100% agree.
no logical reason to do that.
Look at what's happening in the athletic training field.
Yeah, I mean, we talk. You got people that talk about, we have the expected shortage of clinicians. That we had a big drop off because during COVID, some of our older colleagues said that what, enough's enough. Like, I'm not going to do this longer. PTAs and that systematic. Some may feel that they're being eliminated slowly with some of the requirements about not being able to read and certain things of that. But you make additional demands, there's no incentive. You got to go back to school to spend money, make the same money or less. And Nick's point is like, yeah, home health right now, as a whole is where you're more than likely making the most money. But we face our own challenges in trying to do that. And just what 10 years ago, agencies were making money hands over fists just based on how many PT visits were given, right? So it was like, oh, we're gonna see the patient 3-4 days a week for eight weeks, right? Because the visits you did, the more money you generated. And eventually CMS was like, no, that's not gonna work. Like we're gonna choose this. So they do PDGM. So it's like, okay, you get a pot of money. We're gonna give you half of the money up front, and we're gonna see how you do with the patient. And if you we'll give you the rest of it. And if we do well, guess what? You're gonna pay us money. So we all see it in different forms. But to your original point about hoping that in 5 years doing what you're doing today, I mean that's a real considerable thought that you have to give, because it is hard in the outpatient world. I started my career in the outpatient world. Obviously, I did sports residency, so that's where I was. And maybe at that I was just young, naive PD, trying not to tell anybody or whatever the case may be. But money and billing wasn't on the forefront of thoughts. And obviously that evolves as you become more experienced and stuff like that. But there's no way I could sustain myself, let alone my family, on in my area in Florida, the Tampa area. You've got clinicians making high 60s, low 70s, and you can't live off of that here.
Yeah. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different result. And I keep seeing this. It feels like in order to get ahead, just globally, it feels like we're playing checkers and policymakers are playing chess. And we're just a step behind all the time. And these seem like things like to some of us, like it just seems like, okay, this is the next logical thing that's going to occur. We have to acknowledge that some of the issues we put ourselves in, like you talked about, like monies per visit, or like what happened to outpatient, we kind of did this to ourselves. And we have to own that in order for us to advance forward. And, like I said, we know that doing these things doesn't work, back to the masters or bachelors for PTAs. Like, it's been proven time and time again that like this progression in debt based on what tuition prices are right now has not equaled the same, a comparable rise in salaries, like across the board. Like, it's not the answer. Like, this seems like very common sense. So why are we beating a dead horse? Why is that still coming up? And I don't know the answer to that. And it is frustrating because, I take students all the time and I have to sit and have these conversations with them. And, fortunately, state schools around here, I've got a Youngstown State student right now. He's coming out like $55,000 in debt. He's going to be fine.
Amazing.
I've got a pit. Yeah. And that's about where I was. I was like 80. 4 years plus 3. And, I've got a PIT student who's coming out, triple that or something. And, they're worried about it. Yeah, I understand. I don't even know what to tell them at this point. Like, you're going to be okay. You're going to be fine. You're going to make enough money that you're going to get through this, but it's not going to be easy. And that's hard.
Well, and you'll be okay, but you're going to have to make some tough decisions, right? Like where you're going to live.
Yeah. Right.
Are you going to have a house of your own? Are you going to have to move in with a family member, potentially your parents, your in-laws, if you're, in a relationship? Do you want to have a family? Like, what is that going to look like? Right? Because, those things, it's just harder and harder. Buying a house under our current environment is very difficult. Again, it all depends on where you decide to live. Most people want to live close to home. More often than that, the bigger city or dense area, right? So yeah, those are tough decisions. I mean, I always think back to when I started T school, 2005. Vision 2020. Like, who have we asked these hard questions of members of the APTA, like the board or who came up with Vision 2020, and how do they feel like? I know they've moved on from that, but did we even hit any of that other than making DPT programs across the country? Because it wasn't just about making PT programs, right? We had to elevate profession,
right,
the doctoring profession, and to hold this kind of place in medical or healthcare world. As I've said, it's like we're still sitting at the kiddie table, in my opinion. I don't think anything has changed whether we got a DPT or not.
And I think I agree with that. I will say, because I don't want it to be completely negative. The one benefit of the DPT, which I've seen, is we do have autonomous practice. Autonomous practice, I think, is huge, and the ability for people, once you build that relationship with them, to just call you up. Hey, can I get in? That's been huge. I really think that's been a huge fight. That is, I think that is where our bread and butter is in terms of respect within the general population. Most settings, like skilled nursing facilities and hospital, PT is just part of that. As a standalone, where we're talking about clinics within your communities, becoming known to the general public, which is where our value goes into, I think that's been huge. Now, I'm not sure if clinically practice has caught up to being recognized as autonomous providers in a lot of cases. There's some places that still require you to have a referral. There's, different direct access rules across the states, things like that. But, one of a point of, I don't want to say pride, that's not the right word, but a point of competency that I like to look at, within my clinical practice is when I have returning patients who just call and come in and schedule a direct access eval. I have a back injury, I have a knee injury, something like that. That means I did my job well enough that they trust me for their musculoskeletal needs. And we need to have that stigma or that perception by the general, held by the general public. And I think that's the one area where the DPT 2020, has really excelled and elevated the profession. But, and I've mentioned this before, the problem is we've taken, this ceiling and pushed it higher and higher and higher. I'm not sure what we're doing to elevate our floor. And ultimately you can go on a website, you can look at somebody who's got a 4.9 star rating. They've got 300 good reviews and they have one bad one. People are going to look at the bad one because that's the nature. We have to elevate the floor to really, continue to embrace the changes we're trying to accomplish.
What suggestions would you make to elevate the floor, to get it closer to the ceiling?
We need to do a better job of calling out, essentially bad practice when bad practice is bad practice. In our field, ultimately time is our number one intervention. We don't have great evidence to support the superiority of one intervention over the other, and we're always spending time fighting back and forth. And what are our outcomes? What are our long-term outcomes? How are we measuring those outcomes? So on and so forth. And we're not really looking at what the value is to the patient. Okay. because you can get value to a patient through all of the different interventions that we sit here and talk about. But what's not valuable is when a patient goes in and is treated for 55 minutes by a tech and spends 5 minutes with a PT. What's not valuable is when you're sitting there with 3 other patients going at the same time. What's not valuable is when you're on your 12th home health visit 6 weeks after a total knee and you're doing straight leg raises and heel slides. It's not the accountability. And I don't see a lot of accountability for those low practices. We sit and we complain about it on social media and stuff like that, but when's the last time you saw, say, the APTA say something against these big businesses that are well known for mill practices? Hey, don't do that. But they've got their strategic partnership and they've got their $20,000 booth at APTA CSM. So we just accept it because it creates a lot of money. That money gets reinvested, right? It's politicking, and that's we're never going to get away from that, if we're being completely honest. But it does happen, and if we don't recognize it, we're probably not going to be able to start the conversation like, how do we improve this?
Very, very valid point. I know there's a lot of companies that just rather hire someone who with a license just to get patients seen, because patients and clinicians are numbers to them. I don't see it changing anytime soon. And I don't want to be one policing the profession or even clinicians, but you're right. We have to have some level of accountability if we have to become the go-to for MSK disorders in the community.
Well, I think that how you're able to impact that is, this probably sounds cliche and silly, but it's really one patient at a time. Because nothing that Nick does is going to impact anything happens in Maryland or for Mo or the Tampa area for me, right? Because you're doing what you're doing in your community, and that's where you have the impact. Just like I would have the impact here, would have the impact in her community. And those are the things that most people never hear about, because we're all in our bubbles. I don't know that we'll ever make it to the point where, as the nation, we're having those impacts. I don't know that the APTA should be the one making those to the impacts. If I'm honest, I don't think they have the wherewithal to make it individualized, right? We always talk about individualized care. And we have to be individualized with our impact our community, because our communities are all big. Our communities have different needs. We know Nick, like, you're involved in your community. Everybody comes to you because how you've established yourself amongst your community. But the dynamics of your community are much different. You live in a smaller area, a more rural area. Everybody kind of knows everybody. You don't have these many different options, right? So you have to make of what you got at your disposal. And to think that the APTA is somehow going to come in each of our communities and have this same broad impact, I think is ridiculous. I just don't see in any way, shape, or form how the APTA, outside of sending some money to some lobbyists, stuff like that, but even then, I just don't see it, right? So I think we have to make the impact within our communities, and then try to make math work that way. Unfortunately, you mentioned some of these, companies, and some of us in one way or another have always had has some sort of interaction. But like Mo said, you're a number, and the only things that you have are time, right? The time is set. You typically 8 hours in a work day. You can't make the days longer, so you've got to figure out a way to get more people walking through that door, right? And there's people that okay with whatever that dynamic is. So until we start to make the impact in our community to say, hey, no, I went to Nick, I'm not going to tolerate that. And truthfully, I feel like it's never going to change, and it may never change. But at the end of the day, some people get in, get out. They've accustomed to that dynamics from a PT standpoint. Somehow works for them, or it doesn't. They just accept it, and I just think that really the only way we're going to have any kind of impact on the financials, because these companies are just going to continue to cut. You said it's happened for 10 years. They just continue to. That doesn't make it right. Right? It's what they do, and everybody just follows suit.
Yeah, that's a great point. I 100% agree with you. I mean, I think I've always been like, pretty open about like the community aspect is big, and I think that's why, I don't get as worked up about these big things that change, these big picture things, because as long as I'm controlling what I can control, like you said, that's what drives my purpose in what I do. I feel very, very fortunate to work where I do and do what I do, and to be as ingrained in my community as I am. And I'm not the only PT in the community. There's tons of other people that have their other favorite PTs and stuff like that. And I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea too, which is fine. We've got just hired a new one, so we've got like 5 PTs at our clinic, and everybody goes to their favorites, and then we have PTAs that people go to, and I do think that like your individual accountability is the most powerful tool we have to really promote our profession. And I agree 100%. That is not the APTA's responsibility. That is not what the APTA is for, and nor should they be. So like I said, I respect the fact that that's not necessarily where I would want them to jump in either. And I sometimes struggle with I don't want to come across as like anti-APTA, because I'm not. I haven't seen the value yet. It reverts back to what value have I seen in terms of like what's going to affect me. And my big thing is at some point we got to stop the bleeding with Medicare. Like we've got to, I'm a big. I work in private practice, so I believe in payment site neutrality. Those little things. I could care less about a lot of the other things, because a lot of the other things I feel like we tend to focus on are things I can control myself at times. We have a lot of social, conversations, socioeconomic, or social determinants of health and stuff like that. And we make all of these, these resolutions, and I see the HOD posting about them, and like, yeah, those are absolutely a thing. And I totally agree that we should work on them. So, I do. That's something that I don't need as much help with. I can find, resources within my community, or I can figure out ways to, make this work or whatever. But like, I need that lobbying at a bigger scale. Does that make sense?
So you're basically saying that the APTA should be concentrating on bread and butter issues, the big issue of payment, to support clinicians to make sure that they're getting paid and not being undermined, and also even practice owners who don't belong to private equity firms that are struggling with staff shortages and decreasing reimbursement. Those are the issues we should be focused on. I think
those are big parts, yeah. And I want to say that without undermining these other initiatives, because these are things that affect me, and it would be wrong of me to say these are more important than anything else, because I'm just one person too, or there's plenty of people like me, but like, that's not just my. Just because it impacts me doesn't mean that other things don't impact other people else. So, there has to be that balance there. And that sounds probably entirely too diplomatic, but, this is what's impacting me. And, if it's impacting enough people like me, I would like to see things change. And that's when I would find the value in, having a membership. But, if it's not, then where do I go from there? One of the big reasons I like the OPTA. One, Ohio has a great practice act, I believe. I think they've done a great job lobbying. But another one is they've been pushing this fair copay bill. And you know what? you can't have a copay of a specialist. It's got to be like your PCP is basically the out, like that is so important. There are so many people in my community that would make such a huge difference for. And like, yes, that is meaningful change. So like, I want to support that in any way I can. Right. I'll send the letters to the congressman, my representative, stuff like that. That is great. I would like to see more of that, I guess.
So I know there are many other states that do that are arguing for fair copy, Maryland included. And there's a ripple effect. It's the same way you guys are saying that, it has to be individualistic in terms of like care to create a ripple effect. It's the same way with the state chapters. And I do wish that there was somewhere for you to be a member of your state chapter without being part of national, but again, I don't control any of that.
Right.
Too. So
but
I'm glad you are doing legislative parts to assist the chapter in writing letters and stuff like that, because that's definitely needed.
So on the issue of, payment and reimbursement, I mean, obviously everybody knows we're in an election year, so a lot of things are going to be said. A lot of things are going to be proposed and thrown. And something that always seems to poke his head, and I don't know if we're any closer now than we ever have been, but Medicare for all, right? That always gets thrown out as possible solution to healthcare in this country, and how some people have access, some people have access, but it's not really equal access, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think, if we ever made that position, how that affect our profession, specifically from a payment standpoint? Obviously, this is all hypothetical, so nobody knows any what it would even.
Gosh, boy, I have thought on that for a long time, and I really don't know 100% where I stand on it. You look back, I've been practicing through Obama, through Trump, through Biden, and every year there's been a change. So like, it doesn't seem like, like a partisan issue in terms of like what we're doing. I understand a lot of this comes back to the Balanced Budget Act, which I believe was Bush. So when you talk about things politically, like the Medicare for all gets thrown around. Okay. If we eventually go to Medicare for all, okay, fair enough. If that's the reality, I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to do my best to work within that system. My lived experience says we aren't going to get very much of that pie, unless we, I don't know, maybe. I don't know what we have to do. I want to say unless we show our value better or whatever, but I don't even know what that would look like in a Medicare for all system. MIPS is almost, nothing. But, I've seen a lot of conversation from people who have like dealt with it in the NHS and private practice, over in the UK. And, a lot of clinicians over there who are part of the NHS say that pay is abysmal compared to private practice. And, that probably would go the way of, the US. I feel like you'd probably see a lot of that carry over. You'd have a lot of people who are making not as much. I don't think anybody would ever make bad money as a PT. I've talked about this quote before. I think it was Jason Silver now who said it. Having a PT license is a first class ticket to middle class living in the United States, and that's probably true. I don't think we'd run into that, but when you throw in the factors of ROI and debt and stuff like that, you're probably going to have a lower pool to pull from. And cash base, private pay, whatever it is, that's always going to be a niche, and there's always been people that are going to carve out well-to-do financial settings, but they're going to have to find that right spot, and more power to them if they can do that. I would never fault somebody for pursuing that. I only fault them if they are grifting or pretending like there's some superior, like service than anybody else. So, if we did go the way of Medicare for all, I guess I kind of see that, kind of like what it kind of looks like over in Europe, like they kind of talk about. But boy, your guess is probably as good as mine, if not better.
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree with everything that you said. I mean, I feel like if that change was ever made, although it would have probably a positive effect as a whole, in giving access to the population and people being able to get the health care that they need. Because I mean, if we're being honest, physical therapy is important. It's my job, my whatever. But for the most part, there's people that got bigger problems, that don't always boil down to their ability to move, or their ability to move pain free per se. Like people will always there's people out that are praying that they had the problems that we may have. So there's people that need help, that need access to get that help, that doesn't come to their ability to move or play game or do whatever the case may be, right? So there's bigger problems out there for others. But with that said, it would definitely impact how we would practice and how we would get paid and how we would get reimbursed, because now you've got one pot that you have to share across the board. Theoretically, these are all assumptions. We don't know how this would even look or what it would entail, just based off assumptions. But one of the things that I think that could potentially be a problem is we touched on the point of low standard of therapy, and I think that something like Medicare for all would probably emphasize that a little bit more, because now there's really no motivation to excel, right? Because technically everybody's the same, everybody's getting paid the same, no matter what you're doing, everybody's going to get whatever this rate is or is, so be one of my concerns is, there's no motivation to be better, there's no motivation to do better, but just my 2 cents.
So Nick, you co-authored a book with it's Penny, about payment. Do you think that clinicians should make it their duty to understand reimbursement?
I do. I think you should understand it, and a lot of clinicians, like my understanding, and this is something I've recently become more aware of, is like they just plug their treatments in and the computer does the billing for them. They don't even know what they're billing. They have no idea how that's impacting anything. And, you need to have a little bit better understanding of that. One, I think that reimbursement is important because you need to know like what you make and like what overhead is, and understand like, a business has to run, right? You're a business owner, Mo, and obviously I think that like transparency between employers and employees is imperative to that. I think that should be a little bit more freely shared. Obviously, Medicare, Medicaid fee schedules are easy to look up. That's a Google search. So just about anybody who's, if you got your DPT, you can probably work a computer. But the other thing, that, one of the reasons Penny and I looked at that is like people don't understand how their license are being used necessarily. Another part that I think about a lot is not only does it have financial implications for us, but financial implications to our patients. We talk about, somebody's got a $60 copay and they've got Anthem insurance and they come in and you see them for 32 minutes and they get 8 minutes of TE, 8 minutes of NME, 8 minutes of manual, and 8 minutes of gait training. And all of a sudden you're getting 4 units in 32 minutes, and maybe you work for bigger company that's been able to negotiate higher rates. So that person's got a $60 copay for their $240 total bill, and they were seen for 32 minutes. And they've got a $5,000 deductible. Is it ethical for us to treat a person that way because they have commercial insurance versus having to see a Medicare patient 53 total minutes and bill the same number and get reimbursed at, what is it in my area, like $110? There's a little bit of an ethical dilemma there in terms of like, do patients even know this? If you're going to do that to a patient, do you tell them up front? We're going to bill you differently than somebody on Medicare or Medicaid? Is that conversation have? How many patients are aware of that? Or are you going to treat everybody based on, Medicare, Medicaid standard and one-on-one care? How are you going to define your CPT codes? And, have you considered that? So if, and the counter side to that is always, if you're the clinician, like, well, I just billed $260 in half an hour and I'm getting paid $35 an hour. And I've been asked to do that, where I've been asked to jeopardize. Yeah, it's totally legal, but I've been asked to jeopardize my ethical, obligation to a patient in order to make you more money. I think providers need to have a better understanding of that. And that's kind of a hill I'll die on, because it is, at the end of the day, your license.
There are a group of clinicians who do not care. They just want to show up at a job, do the work, and go home. They don't care if you're making $200, $60, $80 off a visit. They just want a certain rate, and that's what they do. So it doesn't matter if you want to be transparent, if you want to educate them on how billing or coding is done. They just want to show up at a job, do the work, and go home. So it will help for people to have a better understanding, so they could practice at the top of the scope of the license. But there are people who just do not care, and you can never win them over, no matter how hard you try.
You're absolutely, and that's so hard. That's so hard. That just. I struggle with that, because I mean, we're all in this together. Anybody who's probably watching this podcast or has taken time to look at this, like, you don't want to be represented by those people. You don't want to be associated with those types of people. And to me, that still reflects badly on me. Like if I go up to somebody who that person treated, and I say I'm a physical therapist, they're gonna have a preconceived notion about me. And as much as it may not be fair to me based on their experience, it is fair. Then I have to go against that. And it happens, unfortunately, more frequently than we like to admit. But that's just tough. That I hate that exists, but like you said, there's nothing you're going to do about that. That's human nature.
It is, unfortunately. So, but it's part of the battle that private practice owners have to face. Or even clinicians within the system.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the same with you too. I'm sure you've struggled with, as many people as you guys run through, like staff that are just, you get that one. It's like, boy, you really haven't done anything where I can like let you go. But like, are you really upholding value? Your name is attached to your company, right? Like that person's a reflection of you. And some people just do not care. They do not care that they are representing the person who's paying their paychecks.
So there are people who are disgruntled that they're not getting help. And we've seen it across the political landscape for the past 12 years. So disgruntled clinicians or business owners trying to do their own thing. And not particularly work within the system. What advice would you give to someone who is just like, I don't want to be part of this profession anymore?
Oh, man, you guys are coming with the hard questions tonight. Jeez. Yeah. I truly enjoy what I do. I go to work. I enjoy my people. I enjoy my patients. I enjoy my coworkers. I have bad days. Absolutely. I have days where I don't want to be there. My job and by essence, my career provides me with an intrinsic, value of self-gratification. I think that what I do is valuable. And I think that the interactions I receive from people are valuable, and most patients don't realize that they do as much for me in terms of, giving me a purpose to become better than I do for them. a lot of times I'm just guiding people through basic. You know, I'm a coach, not necessarily a a provider. And people who lose that intrinsic drive and that ability to get the gratification from helping people through things that are challenged for them, like whatever it is that got you to that point, if you can't address it, I think you need to change. I understand there's financial implications. I understand there's, logistical implications that may not always be possible. But I hope that people like that, have enough resources around them that they can start to utilize them to find their way onto something that's better for them. There's nothing worse than being stuck in any situation that you don't like and that doesn't provide value to your life. And if you're not willing to step outside your comfort zone and change that, you're going to have a hard time getting through that. And change is not comfortable. It's going to take a leap of faith. I think a lot of clinicians, maybe it's just apathy. Maybe they just, they're like, I'm doing the same thing. I'm punching the clock. I don't find that purpose, but I just don't have it in me at that point to put myself into an uncomfortable territory, and take that risk and find a new career and put my future in jeopardy. Alex, you said at the beginning, it's all about what you can do for you. What about your family and stuff like that? God, I don't want to say just it's not just as easy as get out, but there has to be ways to try to refocus and finding resources, whether it's friends, family, other, opportunities around you to refocus on. But I don't know if I could ever come up with the right answer for somebody in that situation because I don't know what drives them. Maybe I just try to help them figure that out.
I mean, I get it. I know earlier in my career, I did start off practicing in outpatient orthopedics, like Alex. And when it started to become like, hey, I'm just doing the same thing over and over again, and being faced with some ethical dilemmas, switching settings actually did do the trick. And it made me refocus and find that love again. It's just tough for me to see someone who did all those years of schooling and wanted to get into a profession to help people, go from that to totally something else. It baffles me, but I'm not here to judge anyone. But.
Right.
So maybe a change in setting. It helped me.
Could be.
I'm sure it helped absolutely. Alex. Yeah.
I think it's when said it is the ultimate factor, right? Like what drives that individual? What is the energy that makes them get up every day and do anything, let alone over their career, right? We all have different intrinsic factors that motivate us, that drive us to do what we do every day, and to the point, like not every day is peachy. There's days where you don't be at work and you'd much rather get home with your family or going on vacation or whatever the case may be. We have certain responsibilities and things that we have to do. Doesn't mean we always want to do them. It's just what we have to do. But at the end of the day, there's something inside of each of us that drives us. There's something that motivates you, and when you've lost that, then you kind of have to take a couple steps back to figure out what is it that got you started, or what is it that will get you started. And obviously, whether it's a change of practicing, change of city where you live, there's many different ways that you can go a bit. But you gotta find what drives you, because if you don't have that, you haven't identified or re-identified that, then you're just gonna end up going circles. Because you're not really using the right energy tools for whatever you want to call it to get you going forward.
So Nick, you're a clinical instructor. I'm sure you've come across your share of students who've probably expressed maybe some regret of going to PT school, knowing what they know now. What advice would you give to them?
So I want to preface this a little bit. I've had a lot of PT students, and I've had that sentiment shared by some of them, but I've had a lot of PTA students. I've had a lot of PTA students who have gone through the PTA program, became clinicians, and now are no longer in the field. A relatively high majority, actually. Part of that is where I'm at. We actually have like 2 PTA programs relatively close by. And I still stayed in touch with them. And it's just, maybe it's because PTA is like, it's a 2-year degree, so maybe it wasn't as much invested. But they've talked about, finding passions elsewhere. And to that, I encourage them to pursue those things. When I get to the PT students, they do feel a little more trapped. It's like, how am I ever going to make this work? And there's a lot of fear coming out of school. And, a lot of them have had a bad clinical experience, and they're like, I don't want to go back to doing that either. And sometimes that makes things harder to find in terms of jobs. There has to be that conversation of, if you've made it this far, you likely have the resiliency to make it a little bit further. I try to impart on them that, like, again, it goes back, it's your license. You have the control over what you do with this license. When you get a license, you are there to serve the public. You are not there to serve your boss, or your company, if they're making you do things that do not have the best interest of the people you are serving in mind. Utilize that. We do fortunately live in a country where, if you so choose to, branch off and go elsewhere, there are other opportunities for you. I think that anybody that can go through 7 years and get a doctorate degree should being the key word, have the mental acuities and capacity to branch out and be successful in another field. They may need to get more education on that, but they could be successful in a field that doesn't necessarily require college education or whatever it may be, and use that life experience of this progression towards this degree to catapult yourself into whatever your next venture may be. If they are unable to do that, I think we've probably failed them as an institution, if they can't progress outside of a siloed thinking in terms of profession. But to circle back, to answer the second part of that question, I just try to encourage them to take the time to find what is valuable to them, and like you said, setting change, whatever it may be. Don't be afraid to kind of put yourself out there, and you may just like whatever you fall into.
How easy was it for you to start putting yourself out there, especially on social media?
Oh,
It's
terribly
not.
hard. I'm not gonna lie. My progression in putting myself out there has changed a lot over the years. I've softened my viewpoints. I've said some things and engaged with some things that I don't believe now that I did 5-10 years ago, even 2-3 years ago. I've been much more abrasive in the past. I try to be better at that. I think about what I'm going to say before I hit send a lot of times. I'm always thinking about who may be receiving this and how are they going to interpret it. And I don't seek out to try to drive, argument, because I don't think that usually gets us there. I want just constructive conversation. And there are some things that I will keep to myself, solely because I don't think that the backlash is going to be worth it. I know that I will get responses from groups of people that will not necessarily agree with me, and I'm not sure that those groups will come at me with an open-minded conversation. Will they be looking just to tear me down? You see a group attack mentality. We just saw one major one on social media. Some PT made a comment about the recent Trump assassination attempt, and the far right media got a hold of it, and the guy got bullied off the internet. and his company had to make like a statement and stuff. It was like, I mean, like people were just vile to this man, and like, yeah, he made a bad comment. You shouldn't have done that, but I'm not so sure that I feel like his life should be ruined for one misspeak. And that, you know, even saying this right now, putting myself out there by making this comment is very, very challenging. And I've seen the opposite. I've seen conservative colleagues who hold viewpoints be bullied off of the platform by more liberal, you know, leaning individuals, and that just doesn't sit well with me. I have swung through a couple different, you know, belief systems in terms of like political leanings and stuff like that, and just real world experience. But I am trying more and more to understand where each side comes from and why they believe they where they do, and not be judgmental of them where they get that from. Because I don't think that most of the people that you have interactions with truly believe what they're saying or truly are represented by what they're saying. It's more emotionally driven, and they haven't taken the time to step back and you know, be like, hold on, what am I saying, and how does this impact the person I'm saying it to? There's another human at the end of every interaction. So I have struggled very much with putting myself out there because I don't want to be at the other end of, you know, receiving a lot of hate and vitriol, and I don't want it to be misplaced. You know, and I learned that through saying some things that were not well received and were, you know, negatively received, and I apologize to those individuals, and I try to, you know, learn from that and grow from that. And I just, you know, I don't want to, you know, come across as somebody who's, you know, as opinionated as I am and as confident as I am in a lot of things. I don't want to come across as I'm the only one who's right. I think you can be opinionated and confident and still appreciate that there may be right and wrongs, and you don't fall into either of those.
Well said. I'm kind of glad I missed that to the conversation that was going back and forth. So, off air, we'll have to discuss that because I'd like to know exactly what transpired. As a business owner, I've had to be very careful or mindful what I post because of cancel culture. I don't want my business canceled or the people that work for me and with us to be part of that backlash as well too. So I try my best to stay away from certain discussions on topics. But I do believe if you do hold values, you should be outspoken about them. But again, consider your audience. Not everything is meant to be said publicly. And again, every argument you're invited to, you do not have to partake in it. So,
and the other big thing is intent. You know?
I think that's social media in a nutshell, right? I mean, I think it's an open invitation and to get into an argument because very rarely are you having a meaningful discussion, right? Like I think I've said this before, like we've lost the art to disagree with one another. It's all about finger pointing and, oh, you should do it this way, do it that way, this way is better than that way, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I think back to one of Nick's posts not too long ago. If I remember correctly, it was the 4th of July. You had a student, you were off Friday, and you had posed the question, should I give my student Friday off? Like they have plans, they have stuff like that. What seems like a very simple question, just in my interaction with it, looking at the thread and all that stuff, like you got people coming at from every different direction as to how their approach is the right approach, the professional approach, or you know, like it got down to like, well, why don't you ask the student what she wants to do? Like, why should you be dictating to her what she does? I'm like, this is a simple question, right? Like it's really not that deep. But we found
and my mind was made up before I even posted that, but
I'm sure, right? But it's like that very innocent thing and how it takes on so many different legs. Now adds that is really of substance or meaningful or even impacts emotionally more people. Like what comes out of that is just it's crazy, right? So you know, along with you, like I I've taken a big step back from actually posting. I still digest, I still read. It's still a huge, not the main source as to how I get information. Um, and then how I process that. And, algorithms and all these things based on how you're interacting with these different apps is going to take what kind of comes. I try my very best to keep it open so that I'm getting views that I tend to agree with and views I'm like, what the heck? Don't see that. That's the only way that I feel that you can try to be open-minded yourself, because it's very easy to kind of go down, this lane with your blinders on as to what is really going outside of you. And yeah, I think it makes it tough. It's been tougher.
I think that's a great point. You look at intent, I think is huge. Like, okay, maybe that wasn't said perfectly, but like, what was the intent behind it? What was that person's like? What were they trying to drive? I think that's important to look at. And I think we've lost a little bit of that. Like, I've seen, over the past, 8-9 years, whatever, like a lot of people who are very even keeled, even minded have begun speaking less and less. They're not willing to put, essentially a centrist viewpoint out for fear of the backlash. The loudest voices are the ones that are most often heard. It doesn't mean they're the most right. And you see a lot of people like, who used to post things like they're not as active. And it depends on the day. Sometimes I've got a lot of thoughts. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'll go a while without having anything related. I think recently I mean, really in the past couple months, I've been posting more about, just life in general rather than, something polarizing. We're entering, election season. That's that's something I don't even want to remotely touch, not because I don't want to have conversations with people. I just don't think that that's the right medium to have conversations with people. I want to have that conversation with somebody face to face, talking to them so I can understand their body language. I can understand, their passion and their viewpoints on something that means that much to them. I don't have that with social media. So to me, social media, you've seen a lot of people who, have kind of stepping back from that. And I'm trying to reframe on what do I actually want to talk about here? I don't need to put an inflammatory opinion out if I'm not willing to have an inflammatory conversation, which I still do sometimes, but it's something I'm more comfortable having a conversation with over, a computer rather than face to face. And that's really important, in terms of like what I determine I put out nowadays.
Thanks for sharing that, Nick. So, which means that you owe Alex and I barbecue and beer sometime so we could actually discuss JD Vance being chosen as
the
God. VP for Trump. So
sounds great.
So some pork shoulders or brisket, preferably brisket.
It's got to be brisket. It's got to be brisket.
Yes, brisket to me.
we don't break out the pork shoulders for something like that. You need brisket because you really need to chew it over.
So definitely briskets for me. But yes, we definitely have to organize that barbecue tour. Okay.
I agree.
So thank you for joining us again. It has been a pleasure. To any of the PTs that are going to be in Kansas City for the leadership Congress, I'll be there so we can link up, grab a drink or a meal or something. To our listeners, don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms, and we should be back in a couple weeks with our next guest.
Awesome. Thank you again, everybody. Nick, appreciate it, man. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Definitely one of these days we'll have to obviously do this in person. But now, man, this is always a great time and really, really appreciate taking time out of your busy schedule.
Absolutely.
As always, thank you to everybody.
Always appreciate you guys. You guys challenge me. You make me better. I hope that that's not lost on you, and you guys are doing a great, service to the profession. And I'm just blessed to be able to be a small part of what you guys have accomplished and grown. So I truly mean that from the bottom of my heart that I can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Awesome,
appreciate
man.
it.
All right, everybody. Night. Be safe.